Chapter 1: The Mountain Storm. The little town of Pinecrest was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business, where the day started with the smell of fresh earth from the farms and the sound of Mr. Higgins opening up his hardware store. For Jenna, the town was both a comfort and a cage. She loved her bakery, the way the warm, sweet air filled her lungs each morning, the satisfaction of seeing a perfect golden brown loaf of bread come out of the oven. But her heart had always yearned for something more, something the tidy streets and friendly chatter could never quite satisfy. Her eyes were constantly drawn to the immense, brooding mountains that cradled the town, their peaks often shrouded in mist. They were called the Silent Peaks, but to Jenna, they were anything but silent. They whispered to her on the wind, a constant low hum of invitation that tugged at her soul, a feeling she could never explain to anyone in town who thought the mountains were just a dangerous place best admired from a distance. This particular day had been long and busy, filled with kneading dough and frosting cakes for the Johnson family reunion. As she wiped down the counters, the sky, which had been a soft gray all afternoon, began to darken ominously. A deep rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, a warning of the storm to come. Jenna hurried to lock the bakery's front door, the first heavy drops of rain beginning to splatter against the window panes. The wind picked up, howling through the streets and sending a trash can lid clattering down the road. Most people were safely inside their homes, but as Jenna pulled her coat tight, ready to make a run for her small apartment above the bakery, she heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a sound that cut through the noise of the storm, a long, pained, and utterly desperate howl that came from the direction of the forest at the base of the mountains. A chill that had nothing to do with the rain went down her spine. Every sensible bone in her body told her to go upstairs, bolt the door, and wait out the storm. The stories about the mountains were clear. People who wandered off in bad weather didn't always come back. But the sound of that animal's cry echoed in her mind, a note of pure agony that she couldn't ignore. It was the same part of her that couldn't turn away a stray cat or let a plant wither that now pushed her forward. Grabbing her large, sturdy flashlight and a heavy wool blanket from behind the counter, she made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. She stepped out into the punishing rain and turned towards the forest. The woods were a different world in a storm. The canopy of leaves offered little protection, and the wind whipped the branches into a frantic dance. The path, usually so familiar to her on her daytime walks, was a river of mud and slippery leaves. Her flashlight beam cut a shaky path through the darkness, illuminating the driving sheets of rain. She called out, her voice swallowed by the roar of the wind. "Hello. Is anyone there?" It felt silly, calling out to a wild animal, but she had to do something. She heard the howl again, much closer this time, weaker now, a heartbreaking whimper of exhaustion and pain. Pushing through a thicket of wet ferns, her flashlight beam fell upon a scene that made her gasp. It was a wolf, but unlike any she had ever seen in a book or a documentary. It was enormous, its fur a deep, rich charcoal gray, now plastered dark and wet against its powerful body. Its intelligent eyes, a stunning shade of brown flecked with gold, were wide with pain and fear. A massive tree branch, brought down by the storm, had its back leg pinned cruelly to the ground. With every roll of thunder, the wolf flinched and struggled, but the branch was too heavy, its position too awkward. Jenna stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was no ordinary wolf. Its size was one thing, but the intelligence in those gold-flecked eyes was unmistakable. This was a creature of thought and feeling, not just instinct. She knew she should be terrified. One snap of its powerful jaws could end her life. But as she looked into its eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw a noble creature in terrible pain. She took a slow, cautious step forward. The wolf bared its teeth, a low, warning growl rumbling in its chest. Jenna stopped, holding her hands up, the blanket draped over her arm. "Sure, it's okay," she said, her voice surprisingly calm despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." She kept talking, a steady stream of soothing nonsense about her bakery, about the annoying rain, about how everything was going to be all right. She took another step, and then another, until she was right beside the trapped animal. The smell of wet fur and pine filled her senses. Up close, she could see the strain in its muscles, the way its breath hitched with every small movement. Setting the flashlight down on a rock so its beam illuminated the branch, she handed the heavy wool blanket to the wolf. "Here, you can bite on this if it hurts," she murmured, as if it could understand her. To her amazement, the wolf stopped growling and sniffed at the blanket, its intense eyes never leaving her face. Then, it turned its head and gently took the corner of the blanket in its mouth. It was a gesture of such profound trust that Jenna's eyes filled with tears. She knew what she had to do. Positioning her feet in the muddy ground, she wrapped her hands around the thickest part of the branch. It was wet and rough, covered in bark that scraped her palms. She took a deep breath and pulled with all her might. Her muscles screamed in protest. The branch was impossibly heavy, wedged deep into the earth by the force of its fall. She grunted with the effort, her feet slipping in the mud. For a horrible moment, she thought she wouldn't be able to do it. The wolf let out a soft whine around the blanket in its mouth. Gritting her teeth, Jenna found a new reserve of strength, pushing with her legs and pulling with her back. With a great sucking sound, the branch shifted. Just an inch, then two. "Now!" she cried out, her voice strained. The wolf seemed to understand. In one fluid, painful-looking motion, it dragged its injured leg out from under the weight. The moment the leg was free, Jenna's strength gave out. She fell backward into the mud, the branch settling back into the earth with a thick squelch. She lay there for a second, breathing in ragged gasps, the cold rain washing over her face. She heard a movement and looked up. The wolf was standing now, favoring its injured leg. It dropped the soggy blanket from its mouth and took a limping step towards her. Jenna held her breath. This was it. Would it thank her? Or would the wild instinct to flee from a human take over? The massive creature lowered its head and nudged her hand with its cold, wet nose. Then, it began to gently lick the mud and the scrapes on her palms from the rough branch. A sensation, warm and electric, spread from the point of contact up her arm, flooding her entire body. It was a feeling of connection, of rightness, so powerful it stole her breath. It was as if a missing piece of her soul had suddenly clicked into place. The wolf looked deep into her eyes for one long silent moment, its golden-flecked gaze seeming to imprint itself on her very heart. Then it turned and, despite its limp, moved with a silent, powerful grace into the shadows of the storm-lashed forest, disappearing as completely as if it had been a dream. Jenna sat in the mud for a long time, the cold seeping through her clothes, but a strange new warmth glowing in her chest. She picked up her muddy blanket and her flashlight. The walk back to town was a blur. The storm was finally easing, but the tempest in her mind was just beginning. She had gone into the forest to save a life, and she had the distinct feeling that her own life had just been irrevocably changed. She didn't know how, and she didn't know why, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the wolf with the gold-flecked eyes was not gone from her life. Their story, whatever it was, had only just begun. Chapter 2. A Secret and a Soulmate. The world of Pinecrest seemed to have lost its color and its sound in the days that followed the storm. For Jenna, the familiar routines of her bakery felt like moving through a thick, muffling fog. The dough she needed was just dough. The cakes she decorated were just sugar and flour. The cheerful ring of the bell over her door was an intrusion, and the friendly chatter of her customers felt like noise from a distant room. Her mind, her entire being, was trapped in that moment in the forest. The feel of the rough bark, the sting of the rain, the intense intelligence in those gold-flecked eyes, and the shocking electric warmth that had spread through her when the wolf had nuzzled her hand. It was a feeling that had taken root deep inside her, a constant, humming awareness that something fundamental in her life had shifted. She felt a restless pull, a magnetic draw that kept her gaze constantly drifting toward the silent peaks, now standing serene and green under a calm blue sky, holding her secret. This new, strange feeling of waiting came to an end on the third day. The bakery was quiet in the late afternoon lull, the scent of cinnamon and yeast hanging warmly in the air. Jenna was in the back, restocking shelves, when the bell on the front door chimed. She walked out, wiping her hands on her apron, and then she stopped dead. Standing in the middle of her shop, looking as out of place as a mountain lion in a petting zoo, was the stranger. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in simple dark clothes that seemed both practical and strangely elegant. His hair was the same deep charcoal gray as the wolf's fur, and his eyes were the exact same shade of brown, flecked with brilliant, unmistakable gold. They were fixed on her with an intensity that made the air leave her lungs. For a long, silent moment, they simply stared at each other. The hum in Jenna's blood erupted into a full, roaring symphony. The warm, tingly feeling from the forest returned, so powerful it made her knees feel weak. It was a feeling of completion, of a lock finally finding its key. "My name is Asher," he said. His voice a low, quiet rumble that seemed to vibrate right through her. It was the same underlying power she had heard in the wolf's growl, but softened, shaped into human words. "I came to return this." He held out her wool blanket, now clean and neatly folded. Jenna's voice was a whisper. "The wolf?" Single slow nod. "Yes." She moved without thinking, flipping the sign on the door to closed and turning the lock. The outside world, the town of Pinecrest, no longer existed. She led him to the small table in the corner of the bakery, the one where she often had her morning tea. He didn't look at the pastries in the case or the homey decorations. His entire focus was on her, as if she were the only thing in the universe. He began to speak, and his words painted a new world over the top of her familiar one. He told her of the Mountain Peak Pack, a community of people who had lived in the high, hidden valleys of the silent peaks for centuries. They were not monsters, he explained patiently, but guardians. The wolf was not a separate beast. It was another part of himself, as fundamental as his own soul. He spoke of a deep connection to the land, of a responsibility to protect the wild heart of the mountains from those who would seek to tame or destroy it. It was a truth that should have been unbelievable, yet hearing it from him, seeing the sheer honesty in his golden eyes, it felt more real than anything she had ever known. Then he told her about mates. His voice changed, becoming softer, more reverent, filled with the emotion that made her heart ache. "For my kind," he said, leaning forward slightly, "there is one person, one single soul the world has made perfectly for you. It is a bond that goes deeper than friendship, stronger than any promise. It is a pull in your blood, a song your heart recognizes." His gaze was unwavering, seeing right into the very core of her. "When you stood in the storm, fearless and kind, I felt it. The bond snapped into place for me the moment you touched that branch. You are my mate, Jenna." The word hung in the sweet air of the bakery, immense and profound. It was a word from fairy tales, yet it settled over her not as a fantasy, but as the simple, stunning truth. It was the only thing that could explain the magnetic pull, the deep-seated certainty, the feeling of homecoming that had overwhelmed her in the forest. He had given a name to the emptiness she had felt her whole life, an emptiness she hadn't even known was there until he filled it. A few days later, he asked her to come to his home. There was no fear, only a thrilling, breathless anticipation as she followed him up a path that was invisible to her until he showed it to her. They climbed high into the mountains, the air growing cooler and thinner, until they came to a hidden valley. The village of the Mountain Peak Pack was not built on the land, but woven into it. Homes were nestled between the roots of ancient trees, built into the sides of rocky outcroppings, designed to be unseen from the outside world. People moved with a fluid, natural grace, their laughter echoing warmly. They stopped and stared as Asher led Jenna through the center of the village. Their eyes, in various shades of amber and green, held curiosity and a natural wariness. She was an outsider, a human. But when they looked at Asher, at the protective way his hand rested on the small of her back, their expressions softened into a quiet, respectful acceptance. Their alpha had chosen his mate. The following weeks were a blur of beautiful discovery. Jenna split her time between her bakery and the mountain, her life becoming a dual existence. In the Pack's village, Asher showed her his world. He showed her hidden hot springs where steam rose into the cold mountain air, and meadows of wildflowers that seemed to bloom just for them. They walked for hours, and they talked even longer. He confessed the heavy weight of leading his people, the constant vigilance required to keep them safe and secret. She told him about her lonely childhood, her dream of a family, her feeling of never truly fitting in among the people of Pinecrest who could never understand her love for the wild mountains. With every shared secret, every quiet moment, the bond between them strengthened, becoming a tangible, living thing. It was in the way his hand would find hers as they walked, their fingers lacing together perfectly. It was in the long, warm hugs where she could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart against her cheek. It was in the soft, lingering kisses they shared under the canopy of stars, kisses that started out shy and grew in confidence and passion, each one a silent promise, a taste of a forever they both desperately wanted. The air between them crackled with a pure, intense romance, a deep and growing love built on a foundation of utter trust and soul-deep recognition. One evening, they sat on a thick, soft fur spread before a small fire in front of his home. The sky was a deep velvet blue, the first stars glittering like diamonds. The sounds of the pack settling in for the night, the soft murmur of voices, the distant howl of a wolf on patrol, was a comforting melody. Jenna leaned back against Asher's chest, his strong arms wrapped around her, his chin resting on top of her head. She had never felt so safe, so completely and perfectly content. He shifted slightly, turning her in his arms so he could look into her eyes. The firelight danced in his golden gaze, which was filled with a love so deep it made her breath catch. "My soul," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "recognized yours, Jenna. From the very beginning of time I think it was searching. And now that I've found you, it will never let you go. It will always, always find you." He wasn't asking a question. He was stating a fact as undeniable as the mountains around them. It was a confession, a vow, and a declaration of a love that was written in the stars. Jenna looked at him, at the man who was also a wolf, her protector, her other half, and she knew. She knew with every fiber of her being that her own soul had been searching for his too. "I know," she whispered back, her voice thick with unshed tears of joy. "My soul is yours. It's finally home." Chapter 3. A Choice and a New Life. The golden, sun-drenched days that followed were the happiest of Jenna's life. Her world had beautifully, impossibly, split into two equally precious halves. By day, she was still the baker of Pinecrest, her hands dusted with flour, filling the shop with the warm, comforting smells of cinnamon and rising bread. The townspeople noticed a new lightness in her step, a soft, secret smile that often played on her lips, but they simply chalked it up to the good spring weather. They could not see the other magical half of her life, the part that began each evening when she would slip away, her heart beating a joyful, anticipatory rhythm as she followed the hidden paths up into the silent peaks. Her true home was waiting for her there, in the form of a man with gold-flecked eyes and a love that felt as ancient and solid as the mountains themselves. In the Pack's village, she was no longer just an outsider. She was Asher's, and the Pack had slowly, warmly, woven her into the fabric of their lives. She learned their ways, helped prepare meals in the large communal fire pit, and listened to their stories under the vast, starry sky. Her connection with Asher deepened into something unshakable. It was in the easy silence they shared, a language all their own. It was in the protective way his hand would rest on her lower back, a constant warm pressure that told her she was safe. It was in the slow, tender kisses they exchanged in the quiet moments, kisses that spoke of a deep, abiding passion and a love that was growing roots, anchoring them together for a lifetime. The bond between them was no longer a strange, new feeling. It was the very core of her existence, the steady hum that gave music to her every day. But the peace of the mountains was a fragile thing. A subtle tension began to creep into the high valleys, a change felt not with the ears, but with the instincts. The birds were quieter. The normal, rustling sounds of the forest creatures grew more cautious. Asher became more watchful, his posture often rigid, his brilliant gaze constantly scanning the tree line. The relaxed man who held her at night was now often in deep, hushed conversations with his most trusted warriors, their faces etched with grim concern. The threat, when he finally explained it to her, was all too human. A development company from the city had discovered the mineral-rich slopes of the silent peaks. They saw not a sacred home, but a resource to be exploited. Survey teams with loud, rumbling machines and maps that dismissed the ancient forests as empty space were pressing deeper into packed territory, threatening to tear the heart out of their world. A cold dread settled in Jenna's stomach, colder than the highest mountain stream. The safe haven she had found was in peril. Her fear was a sharp, physical pain, not for herself, but for Asher, for the pack, for the children who played as puppies in the sun-dappled clearings. Asher and his warriors devised a plan to scare the intruders away, to use their wolf forms to create the illusion of a dangerously large predator population, hoping to make the mountains seem too volatile for profit. It was a dangerous game, a delicate dance of threat and retreat that required perfect timing and carried the constant risk of discovery or injury. The morning the warriors left, the village was blanketed in a heavy, anxious silence. Asher stood before Jenna, his hands cradling her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. His eyes were pools of fierce determination and unwavering love. "You must stay in the heart of the village," he said, his voice low and firm. "Do not go near the borders. The men with the machines do not understand what they are trespassing on. Promise me you will be safe." Jenna could only nod, her throat too tight for words. She pressed a small, honey-sweetened oatcake she had baked just for him into his palm, a piece of her home to carry with him. He closed his fingers around it, his expression softening for a fleeting second before he leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss filled with all the love and fear and desperate hope that swirled around them. Then he was gone, shifting into his powerful wolf form and leading his warriors into the depths of the forest, leaving behind a void of waiting. The hours stretched, thin and torturous. Jenna stayed with the elders, trying to help with daily chores, but her mind was with Asher in the woods. The not knowing was agony. Driven by a need to feel closer to him, to perhaps catch a glimpse or a sound from a higher vantage point, she made a fateful mistake. She broke her promise. Slipping away from the central clearing, she moved quietly toward the eastern ridge, the direction he had gone. It was a terrible error in judgment. The development company, wary of the strange wolf activity, had hired hunters as security, and while Asher's plan was drawing the main survey team away, one of these hunters, a grim-faced man with a cold gaze, had been left to guard the perimeter. He saw Jenna, a human girl alone where no one should be, and saw an opportunity. He moved with a predator's silence, grabbing her from behind, a thick, calloused hand clamping over her mouth. "Well, what do we have here?" he grunted, his breath hot on her neck. "A little scout for the animals. You're going to tell me all about these wolves." Pure icy terror seized her. She struggled, but his grip was like iron. In her panic, she did the only thing she could. She screamed for Asher not with her voice, but with her soul, throwing a desperate silent cry down the bond that connected them, a raw signal of pure fear. "Asher." The response was instantaneous. A roar of pure, undiluted fury erupted from the forest, a sound so primal it seemed to shake the very rocks under their feet. The hunter froze, his grip slackening for a crucial second. From the trees, a blur of dark fur and immense power launched itself into the clearing. It was Asher, but Jenna had never seen him like this. This was not her gentle mate. This was the alpha of the mountain peak pack, a force of nature unleashed. Every muscle was coiled with lethal intent, his lips pulled back from gleaming fangs in a snarl that promised violence, his gold-flecked eyes burning with a feral, protective rage. He moved faster than thought, a storm of teeth and fury. He didn't kill the man, but he disarmed him and disabled him with brutal, efficient force, sending him crashing to the ground with a cry of pain before turning his blazing gaze on the man, a clear, unspoken threat. The hunter, faced with this raw, unstoppable power, scrambled backward, then turned and fled into the forest, his bravado completely shattered. The moment the man was gone, the great wolf turned. The fury in his eyes vanished, replaced by a desperate, shaking concern. He shifted back in a fluid motion, his only thought for her. He was at her side in an instant, his hands running over her arms, her face checking for any harm. "You're safe. I've got you," he whispered, his voice hoarse, pulling her into a crushing embrace. She clung to him, her whole body trembling, burying her face in his chest, the solid steady beat of his heart calming her own frantic one. He had felt her terror across the distance. He had come for her. In the quiet aftermath, as the pack ensured the hunters and surveyors had truly retreated, the reality of the choice she had to make settled over Jenna. She stood with Asher on a high ledge overlooking his village, the one that had become her second home. The wind tugged at her hair, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. He held both her hands in his touch gentle but his expression solemn. "You have a life in Pinecrest," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "A good, simple life. Safe one. My life is here, bound to this land and this pack. It will always hold danger. The choice of where you belong. It has to be yours, Jenna. I will love you no matter what you decide." Cora looked out at the majestic, wild beauty of the mountains. She thought of her small, tidy bakery and her quiet apartment. Then she thought of the vibrant, loving community of the pack, the profound connection she felt to this land, and the man standing before her. She saw her past, her present, and her entire future in his golden eyes. She squeezed his hands, her own decision crystal clear, a truth she had known in her soul for a long time. "My heart is not a place on a map, Asher," she said, her voice clear and strong, filled with a love that would never waver. "It stopped being a place the moment I found you in the storm. My heart is your home. And I am yours. Choose you. I choose us." The relief and joy that transformed his face was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. He pulled her close, and their lips met in a kiss that was deeper and more profound than any they had shared before. It was a kiss of promise, of a future chosen and embraced, a seal on a bond that had been tested by fear and forged in unwavering love. And as Jenna stood there, wrapped in the arms of her wolf, her mate, high in the mountains they would protect together, she knew her greatest adventure was only just beginning. If you were captivated by Jenna and Asher's journey of fearless love and magical destiny, there are countless more stories waiting to be discovered in the world of the Mountain Peak Pack. To be the first to know when the next chapter of their lives unfolds, and to find yourself lost in other worlds where romance and adventure collide, be sure to subscribe. Your next unforgettable story is just a click away.